The Fortune 500 companies are the businesses in America that earn the most revenue every year. Much like how a tire company ranks restaurants, a magazine ranks businesses. Almost all of these companies have instant name recognition, like Microsoft, Aflac, and Land O'Lakes. And if you don't recognize something on this list, it's probably an insurance company. Now, like many of you, I assumed that I was technically a shareholder in all of these businesses as somebody with an IRA invested in the S&P 500. And what's the point of business if not to make shareholders like me happy? Well, it turns out these are not the same lists. The Fortune 500 list includes both publicly and privately traded companies, while the S&P 500 only includes companies with publicly available stocks. There is an overlap of about 300 businesses on both lists, but the Fortune 500 list is specifically the 500 biggest businesses in America based off of revenue. And if there are two things in this world I love, it's supporting big business and applying to jobs. So today, we're gonna do just that. I am going to apply to every single Fortune 500 company in America. Why? Because I believe in self-care, but also because I am a so-called expert on the job market who hasn't applied to a job in almost 5 years, and I don't want to get too out of touch with the realities that my students go through. So let's get into it. Okay, before we get started, we're going to need an email, a resume, a LinkedIn account, an Indeed account, and a list of every Fortune 500 company. I've decided our jobsona for this experiment is going to be a guy named Johnny Fishmonger. He's a recent business grad from Northeastern with 2 years of corporate experience and an internship abroad. Johnny has a diverse array of hashtag business skills, and he is actively relocating. Where to, you might ask? Why, wherever your Fortune 500 job is located. Now, getting a list of every Fortune 500 company is harder than you might think. Fortune itself hides these contents behind a paywall, and every downloadable spreadsheet that you can find online is also behind a paywall. So if I'm gonna track my applications and results, then I'm going to need to find a free list and then write out every single company name by hand, which I did. I can't actually show you this full list because Fortune Analytics are copyrighted, but I can show you a small portion of it and basically ask you to trust me that I did all of this work. For this video, we really want to know what method we had to use to apply, whether or not I was offered an interview, and how long each application took. Applying for jobs online really sucks, and so a big part of why I'm timing each application is to show that it can sometimes take 27 minutes to apply to a single job. And so if there are any of you out there that need to timestamp this video and send it to your dad, please feel free to send this to your dad. And if there are any daddies watching this video, let me know in the comments below. After getting our resume together, we're also gonna need to get our Indeed and LinkedIn accounts fully set up. I'm already predicting that most of these jobs won't let me auto-apply on Indeed or LinkedIn. They're just gonna redirect me to the company website. But both LinkedIn and Indeed have account requirements for getting redirected to those application portals. And so filling out our accounts is still going to be infinitely faster than going into the Google search bar and trying to find every single company website 500 times. Oh God, why am I doing this? As opposed to just letting Indeed do the work for us. And on that note, let's get started doing just that. Now, most applications had a similar process. You type in company name business analyst on Indeed, and then you're taken to that company website to apply. Once I was on the landing page was when I started timing, and it took me an average of 4 minutes and 19 seconds to apply to each of these jobs. Some jobs took a lot less time, and some jobs took a lot more time, but most of them fell into that 3 to 5 minute range. The biggest time sink on every application was having to fill out that self-disclosure form at the end, basically asking me if I'm disabled, if I'm a veteran, and if I'm a non-Hispanic white, which is a shockingly difficult question to answer as an Argentine American, but whatever. The other big time sink was having to re-enter all of the information from my resume back into the company website's job portal, especially for the 195 companies that used Workday to manage their job applications. And let's talk about that for a second. So Workday is basically a cloud software-based HR tool that a lot of companies use for managing job applicants. And I have 3 big issues with the platform after using it to apply to nearly 200 jobs. The first is that you have to create a new Workday account for every single company that you apply to, which is more annoying than anything else, but isn't necessarily an obstacle. The next 2 things were actual obstacles to me filling out job applications. So Workday applications have mandatory pieces of information you have to fill out before being allowed to move to the next section. And almost all of this information has to be filled out through drop-down menus. But there were at least 24 times when those drop-down menus did not work. Refreshing the page didn't help, going back and starting over didn't help, turning off and turning back on my Wi-Fi didn't help. These drop-down menus would just straight up bug out, and I could not finish my job application as a result, especially for the drop-down menus for what country I was in and what university I went to. I think because those were probably the biggest lists that had to populate. And the third issue was just how bad the platform was at auto-populating my information after connecting my resume or my LinkedIn account. And so Workday, if you're listening to this, whatever tool you're using to read resumes is not working. And I know for a fact that this was an ATS optimized resume because I am a literal expert on building resumes and I have my own AI tools that were able to read them just fine. And so if I could make 2 recommendations for you, the first would be just to get a better AI tool. And then the second is to just ditch the drop-down menus and let people fill in their own information. Whenever they bug out, you are actively preventing your customers from being able to apply to jobs. All of those complaints aside, though, Workday turned out to definitely be the lesser of 2 evils, because some of the company websites that had their own applications to apply to were especially atrocious. And I am looking at you, ExxonMobil. For some reason, most of the major gas companies had applications that took me almost a half hour to complete, and that were also riddled with bugs and potential legal issues. So to start out, you have to create this massive profile where you re-enter everything from your resume, classic. But the search function is awful, so even finding words like United States take a few extra seconds and add that much more tedious to filling out these applications. And then you get to the demographics section and oh boy. The OFCC requires any company that receives federal dollars to ask their candidates about things like their gender, their race, their disability status, and their veteran status. Normally, you have the option to not disclose this information if you don't want to. Not with ExxonMobil. Next to these questions were follow-up questions that forced you to out yourself. So like on the veteran disclosure, I could click a drop-down option from the OFCC that said, I do not wish to disclose my veteran status. But on ExxonMobil's website, immediately afterwards, they added questions that forced me to out my military history that only allowed me to answer yes or no, meaning that I had to answer those questions in order to go forward, meaning that I had to out my veteran status, and meaning that the option that I prefer not to disclose that information meant literally nothing. Now, most of the issues I had in this experiment were with gas companies. Phillips 66 also took a lot of time to complete because I had to refill everything out. And then companies like Chevron apparently outsource all of their business roles to the Philippines, so I had to fill out this like foreign job application to even continue. But overall, applying to these 500 jobs was relatively painless aside from the time it took to do so. So what I'm going to do now is fill out the last dozen or so applications that I still have to fill out, and then I'm gonna wait a week or two to hear back from these companies and finally report back to you with the results. Hey, so I actually wanted to record myself submitting my 500th application. One, just to mark that I am finally free from this torture, but also because number 500 turned out to be OI Glass, which stands for Owens, Illinois. And this company has a bit of a special place in my heart. When one side of my family came to North America, they actually migrated from France to Montreal at first so that my great-grandfather could get into mining. But apparently my great-grandmother really hated Quebec, and so they decided to move down to Pennsylvania to work for OI Glass. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Owens, Illinois, for saving my family from Quebec. And with that, I have applied to every single Fortune 500 company in America. I'm gonna be a little honest here, I did get lazy in the middle with like 200 of them, and I intentionally found jobs that I was able to auto-apply to. I realized about 50 to 100 jobs in that every single company uses the same CRMs and the same processes for having to submit job applications, and I was kind of starting to feel like a modern-day Sisyphus spending exactly 4.5 minutes on every single one that I submitted. So when I say that it took that time on average to submit these 500 applications, that did not include the ones that I auto-applied to. They were only the 300 or so that I filled out every portion of. But speaking of statistics, now that all of these are in, I'm gonna wait a week or two and then get back to you with the results on how this experiment went. Drum roll, please! The results are in, and this idea was a massive waste of time. Look, applying to jobs on online job boards largely does not work. Out of the 500 companies that I applied to, I received 35 interview offers, 70 rejection emails, and thus far I have been ghosted by 395 companies. That's a success rate of only 7%, which is admittedly double odds of what you see self-reported on Reddit of people saying that only 3% of applications lead to interview offers. And that's because applying to jobs using general online job boards is not the most effective way to get yourself into an interview. At least according to what I see as a professional who analyzes the job market, has worked with thousands of students and companies, and has been doing this for over 7 years now. Hiring events like career fairs are always your best bet, especially the ones that are at universities or at trade schools if you have access to them. Reaching out directly to company recruiters is also an extremely effective option. And if you are going to use job boards anyway, then finding specialized job boards for a certain industry in a certain area is also going to be a lot more effective than using Indeed or LinkedIn to try to find a job, especially if you can figure out who the hiring team is so that you can reach out to them and say, hey, this is a little bit of context about me. I'm interested in your role. What do I need to do in order to be the most effective candidate at this company? Time spent applying to jobs does not get rewarded. Effort applying to each job is what gets rewarded. And so again, if you need to timestamp this bit and send it to your dad, please feel free to do so. I would rather see somebody spend an entire day applying to one job by researching the company, creating a tailored resume, writing a cover letter, reaching out to their recruiters, and figuring out what they need to do in order to get referred to a hiring manager, as opposed to spending hours and hours and hours doing what I did with virtually no response back. So yeah, applying to every single Fortune 500 company in America. Don't do that, but do subscribe to this channel for more.